Hello, everyone. It's Shea from Little Steps Asia, and today's Insider series is with North London Collegiate School in Singapore. And it's quite an interesting topic because it really is the backbone of the well-being of our children at school. We've got the pastoral, the inclusion topics that we're going to be covering today, but the core of what we're going to be talking about is how safe and supported the school directly impacts our children's success in learning and in life. So to chat about that topic, we've got two fantastic guests. Hello, Lawrence. Hello, Sophie. Nice to have you.
Hello, thanks for having us.
All right. So this is a 4-part series with North London Collegiate School. And we've been talking to the junior school, the senior school, the sixth form, and now we have you both joining us today. So I'd love for you to just introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about how you landed in this in this school, but also just about your position and about yourself. So maybe Lawrence, you could start us off.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, and thanks very much for having us. It's great to meet you. My name's Lawrence, and I'm the Vice Principal Pastoral here at North London Collegiate School in Singapore, and I've been here since the summer of 2024. Sophie and I arrived at the same time, so I still feel relatively new. Still feel like I'm getting used to life here. But before joining this school, I was a deputy head pastoral, so a similar role at a British Czech school in Prague.
Excellent. And Sophie, how about yourself?
Hi, Shea. So again, thank you for having us on. So my role in the school is I'm Vice Principal of Safeguarding and Inclusion. So mine's a whole school position. So I look after everybody from our little pre-Ks down at 3 all the way to our school leavers at 18, 19 years old. My previous role to coming here in Singapore was I was a UK head teacher and then transitioned through to my Vice Principal role here. And as Lawrence said, we started at the same time.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm sure between the two of you, you must have plenty of stories. You're working with parents, teachers, trying to keep up with all the trends that are happening as well. But it's a really nice thing that that the school has you both. And we're going to dive deep in terms of what that support looks like at the school, and just feel free to share away in terms of your experience as well. So before we get started, just for those that are joining us, North London Collegiate School, this is a 4-part series. It's an insider series with Little Steps. We've been diving into lots of different topics, and this wraps up the series. And today we are going to be chatting quite a lot on these topics. But for those that want to learn more, North London Collegiate School has ongoing open days if you're in Singapore. But if you're outside of Singapore, you can always contact them, have virtual tour, meet Lawrence, meet Sophie, ask any of your questions. It's an open door over at the school. So we'll be sure to share the links in terms of how to get in touch. So let's go ahead. So I always like to paint the picture, and this is an interesting area to paint the picture on. But in terms of pastoral and the support, the safeguarding side of the school, maybe if you could just start the conversation by telling us, if you're a student, a family coming to the school, what does that look like day to day?
Okay. I would say we're fortunate at our school because we're from a group of schools where there is a really rich culture, and it's a key part of our identity. And that's providing outstanding pastoral care to all of our students. And I think pastoral care is a challenging concept because everybody knows what outstanding lessons looks like, and everybody knows what we mean by outstanding academic outcomes. And I think it's important to say that our definition of outstanding pastoral care is ensuring that we look after the overall well-being of all of our students. And the areas that I think our families would notice if you join our school, one of the things that you would immediately notice is the individualized care that each student gets. So every student is in a group. Every student in our school has a personal form tutor who see the students day to day, and they are the first point of contact, and they're also the people who are most likely to be getting involved if there's ever anything that needs to happen, any support or any intervention that needs to be put into place. So that individual approach is a really important part of our of our DNA here at NLCS.
And I think
Excellent.
just expanding on that a little bit more from the family side of things. So part of my inclusion work is to engage with the community and help with the community coming together. So if we look at that individualized pastoral care for a child, we can also expand that out to a family where we'll have conversations about identity, about making sure they feel welcome, making sure we celebrate together, making sure that our events reflect the community, but also our parent groups, our parent forums, our parent relation events where we get parents in to talk about either the children or our community are regular and well informed and really personal.
Excellent. And I understand the both of you work from the little ones all the way up to sixth form. Is that correct? So that pastoral care is focused throughout the whole school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sophie has a lot more direct, does a lot more direct work with our junior school than I do on a day-to-day basis. But we are part of the pastoral system. Begins in the junior school and builds up from there. So the sort of fundamental building blocks of our pastoral system begin when students are very, 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 very young, and goes all the way up to when they're in the sixth form. And it's really based around us seeing every student as an individual, us supporting every student as an individual, of course, within the context of a wider school community and a wider way of doing things. But for us, it's that individualized care that's really important, because we think that our students are entitled to be looked after and known and noticed and supported in a really individual way.
So one of the big trends that we're seeing, and we're certainly seeing this throughout Asia, but it's globally as well, is how much hand in hand well-being goes with learning. It really is completely connected. And it's something that when we were learning, it just wasn't there yet. I just wanted to get from your perspective, Sophie, that connection and how emotional safety really does influence academic performance.
Yeah. And I suppose this is a big part of when I'm working more with my safeguarding hat on and talking to families about when students' mental health might be declining, or we're seeing those early stages of anxious behavior or changes in their kind of demeanor in school. This is the kind of root of what we talk about, because students that don't feel safe, there is a genuine connection into the way that their memory works, the way that their receptive kind of cognitive load is working with their learning environment. So what we have to do is make sure that they feel as safe as possible, that they know who to reach out to, that they know how to take care of themselves. And one of the things I was doing even this morning with some of our grade 8s is actually just recognizing those personal kind of signs and symptoms that something's not okay, that I'm not quite all right now, and then being able to translate that into reaching out to either parents, professionals, or people around them that are going to help them move forward. But the academic link is absolutely there, that if our burden is high and that our strain and our anxieties are high, then being able to retain information, process things in a quick way, being able to give and deliver the absolute best that we can academically, then they go hand in hand.
And out of curiosity, what are some of those warning signs or things to kind of look for?
Yeah, so part of the things we say with some of our students is that a personal understanding of themselves, so a really good understanding of self, and understanding that they can deeply reflect on when they feel good, like what does feeling good look like for me. And we understand that across all the different kind of age groups and culture groups in the school, that's going to be personal. And that's where Lawrence's individual care comes in, is we need to know what a good day looks like for each of our students, and we need to know what interests and passions they have, because then we can spot when perhaps they're stepping away from those things, or we're not seeing them engage in the same way that they normally do. So when we then look at a child's individual case, we say, how does good feel to you, and recognize that, and then understanding that when that might decline or when that might change or changes in themselves. Now, alongside that, we also then tell them to look out for signs that perhaps they're carrying more than they should. We talk about caring without carrying. So we can care for people around us. We can care about, the teams we're part of. We can care about our best friends, but we try not to carry their worries with us too. So we talk about letting go of that. So we say, like, for example, if you're feeling worried about somebody else's welfare or responsible for somebody else's welfare, being that person who's checking in that morning and things, there's a sign that you need to talk to somebody else. Or if you're feeling personally that you're worried about keeping a secret for somebody else, there's a sign that perhaps you need to then reach out to someone. So we teach our students those kind of personal look at yourself and think about those signs and symptoms that maybe you're caring, but also carrying something else with you.
I wish we had these tools when we were young. I'm always taking notes. So I wanted to look at the term pastoral care. Obviously, it's a broad term. You see it on websites, you see it in communication, and it's a new term. I just wanted, Lawrence, if you could maybe break down what pastoral care, well, what it is and what it looks like in practice specifically at this school.
I'll try and give you a concise answer to this, because I think lots of people will answer this question in different ways. And you could fill a 3 or 4 hour podcast on exactly what pastoral care means and how it varies between different age groups and different settings and all the rest of it. I think what I would say is that pastoral care, there are fundamental bits of pastoral care for us. So one element is that everybody in our school is important. Everybody, we talk a lot about in our school, everybody matters. And for us, it's completely central to our approach that every student in our school is known. And by that, we mean that the adults working around them understand what those students understand, them, their background, their aspirations, and the journey that they are on. Because we know that in any school, people are moving in different directions at different paces, and everyone is running their own race. And we think our pastoral approach reflects that. So for us, that's very important, because it can sound quite basic to say, every child is known, but actually, from our perspective, what it actually means is that we don't just understand our students, but we then intervene and work with them according to what we understand about them. And as a result, I think when you can achieve that, and we try and achieve that by making sure that there is a consistency in terms of our students working with their tutors or their teachers for a sustained period of time. So and then those adults become far better and far more attuned and far more effective at noticing when something might not be working. And that can, as Sophie was saying a minute ago, that can manifest itself in all sorts of different ways. It can, when a student needs support, it may reveal itself through their work. They might not be doing their work as well as they were, or they might be doing too much work. They might be becoming getting into perfectionism. They might be withdrawn. There might be all sorts of things that are happening. And if you know somebody and if you understand somebody, then you're much better at intervening and recognizing when there are problems. So I think that's important. I think we see pastoral care as being, confronting issues that need to be confronted. A big part of pastoral care, and a big part of where pastoral care and well-being intersect, I think, is to help give students the characteristics to support themselves, to help them to be resilient and help them to bounce back when things go wrong, and to draw the right lessons from challenging situations. And we achieve that through teaching them those things, but also by making the space, making the time to talk to people and to help them. Schools are really, really busy places. We have made a decision that in our school, say in the senior school, for example, every tutor group in our middle school and upper school has 2 tutors. And we have made a decision that our tutors and our heads of grade move with our groups as they progress through the school. And the reason why we made that decision is because we think that consistency and continuity leads to better relationships. And for us, relationships are such an integral part of our pastoral care, because if those things are lacking, then we can't deliver the kind of care that we want to. And I think another thing I would say that is really 2 last things I'd say about what pastoral care looks like in our context is, first of all, us working together as a team. I mean, you made a comment just before we started about, me and Sophie working really closely together because of our areas of responsibility in the school. That's absolutely true. Schools can't function, and professionals who work in education can't function if we're not operating together in the interests of our students. And also having that clear communication with our parents and our carers and our guardians is also absolutely crucial, because if that relationship isn't it isn't functioning as it should, then it makes things much harder for the student, and that's what we're all here to support at the end of the day. And the last thing I'd say is we want in a complicated human environment like a school, all of our students will have different identities. Those identities can be based on things like the languages they speak, the countries they've lived in, the grade they're in, the house they're in. And what we try and do is we try and create a system where the identities they have at school are seen and recognized and celebrated. And Sophie's already alluded to that through our community events and things like that. That's one side of forwarding that agenda. But also, we want our students to feel like they belong, whether it's in their tutors group, in their grade, in their house, and more broadly in our school. And the way that we do that is by talking about it a lot, by having nice things happening around those things. So for us, I would say that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what pastoral care means here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for breaking it down. I did have a question. You mentioned the tutors. So I'm not quite familiar with that. Must be something special at North London Collegiate School. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the tutors and what their role is?
Yeah, so when I talk about tutors, I mean we have sort of slightly different names for them in different parts of the school. So like in the junior school, we would be talking about our homeroom teachers, and those are the people who our students spend the most time with during the day. And as they progress through the junior school and they begin to have more specialized lessons that might be taught by different teachers, then gradually they move to our system in the senior school, where they spend the first half an hour each morning in their tutor group, and their tutor is their pastoral point of contact.
Okay.
So the tutors are there not just to welcome them each morning and to take the registering, to give them important information about what's going on, but they are pastoral kind of interface and the link between us as a school and our families. And our tutor times are great because some of them are, if you were to walk around on any morning, what you would see is in some grades they'll be doing discussion about issues in the world or discussion about issues that matter to our kids here, or they might be doing things that are connected to some of the focus weeks that we have here, or they might be talking about our tutors are essentially academic mentors as well. So they might be talking about reports that have just been carried out into our students and looking at areas for development and things like that. So our tutoring system is about ensuring that every student at our school has got somebody who has a kind of, whose job is holistic. And we all have that on some levels. Sophie will say to our colleagues that everybody has a responsibility for safeguarding and inclusion in the same way that we all have a responsibility for our students' win and academic excellence. But the tutors have that kind of, they have the holistic responsibility for the people in their care. And in each of our tutor groups, there'll be about, there's 2 tutors, usually for about up to 22 students or something like that. So it's very focused on those individualized relationships.
When we train and onboard the tutor team, the best way we call it is you become the children's champion. Like you are the one that knows they're in the school play, they're in the soccer team, they're doing so well in this project. They're the one that gets the full picture of everything about that child. And they're, like you say, the bridge between home and school, the bridge between leadership, the bridge to celebrate them. But also when things get tough, they're the first ones to notice.
I'm really glad I asked that question, actually, because I think when we have these conversations, right, we're meeting the leaders within that, yourself, Lawrence, head of, Pastoral, and Sophie, safeguarding, but to see how you've scaled it within the classrooms and to scale it out to the home, it makes a lot more sense. And it seems a lot more visual. The champions, I like that. So Sophie, I know you're heading up safeguarding and inclusion, which we'll get into, but particularly on the safeguarding. Safeguarding to me sounds like protection. It sounds like, be scared. But obviously with that comes all the, the growth that comes with safeguarding. So could you just share with us your definition of safeguarding and the role it plays at the school?
And I think in a school, there's probably two different kind of strands to safeguarding. There is the proactive safeguarding when something genuinely has gone wrong in a home or with a child or with a relationship and things like that. And we have to proactively manage that within the school. We follow our processes, we communicate clearly, and the priority there is the safety of everyone involved, whether it's about their psychological safety, their mental health, their physical health, anything like that. We follow all of our steps. And that's probably the piece that people assume is the big part of the job. But actually, the second part to it, I would say, is actually much broader, which is the preventative work that a school does. And this is about educating families. This is about educating students, making sure that they understand as they're growing up what genuine risk looks like in the real world. Like, how do we prepare these children to be ready for life? And of course, down in KG1 and things like that, we're teaching them to wash their hands properly. We're teaching them to be safe and give boundaries to people. We're teaching them about, what would be stranger danger and all of those things. And then as they grow, then that develops with them as age. So for example, our grade 11 and 12s, we start building more into outboarding of school and heading towards university. Like, what do different cultures look like? What will different university settings potentially provide you with positive benefits and opportunities, but also what risks might be in that community that are maybe different, for example, to the amazing safe bubble that is Singapore that we live in. So I think a lot of it is also teaching students genuinely about how do I keep myself safe and what are my own sort of personal limits and boundaries, maybe around, for example, communication and touch and things like that. And that grows with the student. I mentioned there as well about making sure that the sort of psychological safety part too, about like preventing burnout, preventing them leading towards what we would consider to be much more high risk safeguarding cases. And there's plenty out there that parents will see and read about cases where students' mental health has declined, or they may have got into risk categories for eating disorders or ideation and things like that. And what we're trying to do in the preventative work is get students to spot signs and symptoms early, be able to communicate with the right people, build relationships at home and at school so that people can help them in the early stages of decline or struggle. And of course, we tell students you're going to struggle at some point. Like, we all reach a point, whether it's exam season, whether it's the day before the school show, whether it's something like that, we're all going to face a struggle. But it's about the management of that and teaching students that safeguarding is far more than just once something's gone wrong. It's about all the steps beforehand. I kind of always imagine it as a metaphor like dominoes. Like, you can always see they're starting to go, but how quickly can we stop it before it becomes something that could potentially be much more high risk?
Good. Yeah, I like the domino analogy as well. I want to talk a little bit about mistakes, because obviously kids will make mistakes. They'll make mistakes socially, emotionally, behaviorally. What is your take on mistakes? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the restorative practices that you have at the school as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I said before, schools are complicated human environments. We are working with mostly young people, and young people make mistakes, and just like older people do. And we see a big part of our role as being helping students reflect on most things and moving forward positively so that they don't make those things again. So our approach to restorative practice is really grounded, we think, in what works, not just in terms of what research tells us or what best practices in other schools, but in terms of what we think works in our school and in our context. And restorative practice is really about just punishing students, although of course sometimes there is a place for sanctions and for consequences, but for helping students to take some sort of responsibility and to see their role in anything that may have taken place. It's not about blame. It's about identifying honestly what happened in any given situation. And it means that you have to invest the time and the space to allow students to engage in what are sometimes quite complex conversations with other students and with adults, so that they can start to try and take some accountability for choices that they've made, and to think about the consequences of the choices they have made, and think about other choices that may have been more constructive. So we do think we do spend time on that. We do think about, or we do, and I think this is very much aligned with, say, the philosophy of the International Baccalaureate, and we're an IB diploma school. The idea of thinking about things from different perspectives, the idea of thinking about things in a way that is empathetic, I think leads to far better long-term outcomes. Because, it's one thing to some extent, any society relies upon the compliance of the people within that society. So we need our students to behave in a certain way, and we expect them, and we have core expectations. But from our perspective, if you just punish a student and there's no space given for reflection, for restoration, for repairing damage, for trying to restore relationships, then what you might get, if you're lucky, is some short-term compliance, but not an end to, say, some of the longer term issues. Whereas restorative approaches are in line with helping our students to take responsibility over the long term and to recognize their agency and their accountability and their responsibility for every interaction that they have in their life. And we think that leads to it's a big part of our mission as a school and as a group is to try to develop people, like young people, who become conscientious, kind and productive members of society. And we think that restorative practice gives us the tools and the language to best achieve those things.
The compassion, the kindness, I completely agree on the IB side of things. It's amazing when you see the end results from these children. I want to switch gear. Parents, obviously, I'm a parent myself. Again, we can get in the way and we can be helpful, but at the core, we all want the same thing, right? We want to help our children. When the children face setbacks, and they all will, like we talked about, mistakes, bigger setbacks, let's say, and the parents obviously want to get involved, they want to help, but they don't know how. I'm just curious to get a little bit more insight, and Sophie, maybe you can lead on this, about how you direct parents and what practical advice you might have in that area.
Yeah, and I'll try and translate this to as many age phases as possible, because there's quite a nuance between a delightful 4-year-old and a high-flying 18-year-old dealing with these things. But what we will do is we'll sort of break it down into some more of the simplicity aspects about being as aligned as possible with school. So I think part of the restorative work that Laurence was talking about is also, like, when we translate this to families, we get their understanding on the case as well. We get their understanding of what's happened, whether there's any external factors that are also playing a part in any of this, and how we can restore fully. One of the ways that we do the kind of restorative piece is we use this kind of concentric circles model, where we talk to the child about who's affected, and genuinely who's affected. And it gets broader and broader and broader. And, they might say the person that they had an altercation with is right at the center of that. And maybe their best friend who had to speak up and speak out and say something. And then they might say, our teachers and things. And then quite often in the wider circle, they might say, for example, me and Mr Baxter, because we had to have a meeting with them and give up our time. But children generally being able to see the impact of something that they've done is a big part of that. So that's a really kind of, I suppose, like top tip of asking parents, of rather than them just saying, I'm going to say sorry to that person, but go like, what's the bigger impact here? Like trying to break it down and say like, and why was that person impacted? What did they give to this situation? What did they give up, or what did they have to do to help? Another piece that I sort of recommend, I sometimes give, I'm a parent too, and I'm not perfect, in any shape or form. I'm always asking for advice from other people too. But there's a point at which, when a student has made a mistake, or they're at a point of really feeling either that guilt or anxiety or something around it, and we make a decision in our heads between sympathy or solutions. And in that moment, do I need to give this child sympathy right now? Do they just need whatever a hug looks like in your family? And do they just need someone to just hold them for a second, or hear them out for a second, or just let them rage for a moment and let all the feelings out and let the sympathy take action before we offer any solution? Because I think as a parent, particularly when it's a school environment and you're thinking about, oh gosh, I'm going to have a meeting with the head of year and I'm going to do that. And instantly we start moving towards solutions. I think we're solution focused people, that we want to make our child have the best possible outcome. We want them to have the best possible journey through school. But sometimes taking a breath first and just let them either hug it out, cry it out, scream it out, tell you every part of the story that's whizzing through their heads, draw lots of pictures of what happened with our young students. Sometimes I say, let them just draw and scribble and do that while you're talking, and let all of that emotion play out first before you go into solution mode.
So hard to do though, isn't it?
It's hard, for sure.
It really is
sure.
innate. You're just always wanting to fix.
I have a 5-year-old and I don't always do. I do my best to, but I try to.
But I like the simplicity of it. It's just an easy one to kind of take home and remember. So in terms of, obviously we're very protective of our children as well, aren't we, the parents? And there is that, do we jump in and intervene? Do we get involved with the school? So I just wanted to get your take on advice to parents, advocating for their children versus stepping back, letting the school handle it or the child handle it in regards to resilience and independence. Yeah, I think we need some more lessons.
So I think there's always this piece around like modeling healthy responses. And I think, particularly with our older students, like having that kind of workplace mentality of, something's come in that's a challenge. Like what would we do? What would we do? First of all, we probably would think through the facts. We try and think, have I got, any emails or evidence of what's happened and things like that. And I think for our parents, just advocating how to model a healthy response and how to think things through, rather than necessarily holding someone's hand through every bit of the process and going, I'm going to call straight away and get an appointment and get a meeting. Just try and think the process through as much as possible. Now, absolutely, having parents that advocate for their child is incredible. And that is absolutely what we want here at North London. We've got students whose parents are very visible in our community, who want to come and talk to us, give us suggestions on how we can move things forward. And that's a really special thing. And I'm saying not saying to parents, don't turn up and advocate for your child, but I think it's that modeling a healthy response to a challenge is really powerful. Demonstrate that calmness, demonstrate that perspective, demonstrate kind of that self-compassion of like, okay, this is my mistake, and okay, how can we move forward with that, and what do I see as a good solution? Because there's something really powerful about a student then coming to that first meeting after they've had a bit of time to stop and think and a bit of pause and reflection, to come forward and go, okay, I really realized this didn't go so well, but this would really help me. There's something really powerful in that empowerment of a young person when mistakes have happened. And if parents can hold their hands through that, it's going to, like Laurence said, give them a much better longer term journey. It's like, okay, I managed that once myself. I know how I can step forward with this.
Good. Laurence,
Yeah.
Did you have something to add on there?
Yeah, I would add, and I think I'm just going to say what Sophie said, but maybe in a slightly different way, because I think that the importance of partnership between families and school are really key. And I mean, I give you an example in the senior school or in our sixth form. Let's take our sixth form for example. We've got a whole group of students who are about to do their international baccalaureate diploma exams. They are the key. Like the students are the key people now. It's kind of up to them in terms of, we deliver the course, we give them the resources, where they have 2 years of teaching, and then they have to go away and hopefully thrive and do really and be really successful. But over the course of their entire life leading up to this point and including this point, they will have relied on so many everyday and also quite big supportive interventions from their family in order to get this far. One of the things that I think that, and we're no different from any school in this respect, if we want our students to succeed, then we need to have a shared language and a shared understanding of the key things that apply to our students. So ensuring that our families, for example, have a really good understanding of our curriculum, they have a really good understanding of the demands of the international baccalaureate, they have a really good understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about well-being. But, we have a responsibility to make that clear to our families. But obviously, we work in partnership, so our families have a responsibility to be open to that and to work with us and so that we can move forward in the interests of our students. So I think sometimes, and I think Sophie's alluded to this, when people are young, there's going to be challenges along the way. And I think the thing that we always have to remind ourselves of is the importance of the student that we're working with and also the partnership around that student. So I think that's, for me, that the relationship between us as a group of professionals and the family of students is so important. And I've seen so many examples in my career where students get the best outcome and they become really strong young people because we're able to work together and because we're able to pull in the same direction and because we're able to apply and ease off on pressure at certain points and because we're able to be really open and honest with each other. That is, for me, that's a key variant in terms of having a really successful, certainly senior school.
Excellent. Yes. I think that, when you can get the home and the school aligned, that is where the magic happens. And I think what you were talking about earlier with the tutors and having those checkpoints, and it comes from the ethos of the school, and then it's obviously brought through all the way down to those homerooms, and then obviously translated into that language with the
Yeah.
families. So in terms of getting the families involved, again, I think when your child's young, it's quite easy, right? Like there's a lot of opportunity to come into the classroom, and the parents are getting together more outside of the, at the coffee dates and the playrooms. And but as they get a little bit older, they get more independent. Are there any specific things that North London does specifically to encourage involvement between the school and the families themselves?
Yeah, there's a bit of a combination here. So it's the way we can communicate messages out. So whether that's in the more informal methods through, for example, like class list app and newsletter, but then it's the more opportunity for a range of communication settings. So is it the principal's coffee morning, which is every week, anyone is welcome to sit down with one of our principals, have a coffee with them and just say hi. Like you don't necessarily have to be there to raise a problem or do that, just to get to know them. Because, the more human the school environment is, the much easier it is when something does go wrong. It's the idea that when we do, for example, our cultural events, so we've just had our community iftar, we have our international food festival. We form committees of members of the community who work together with a lady called Kate Greening, who's our fantastic events lead and community engagement director, who will get to know them and understand, like, okay, this is something that you're really interested in. This is the kind of network that we can build within our parents. And then part of it, I suppose, is also just understanding that in the transience of an international environment, how can we make sure that always new parents get the best out of the school? So Lawrence works really hard, as well as the junior school pastoral team, to make sure that when that onboarding process happens, so say they arrive in January, you're mid-year, like how are we making sure those parents feel just as welcome as everybody who started in August? And it's that total like individualized approach of like, okay, we've got a whole new group of families that we need to make feel that this is a safe space for them, this is a home for them. And, as I say, it could be a very gentle coffee with the principals down to, or up to, a much more kind of formal leading a committee for one of our amazing events like the Deepavali celebrations, for example.
Okay. I wanted to dive into a little bit more about stress. Obviously, Singapore, Hong Kong, a lot of these countries get a lot of movement, right? There's a lot of expats that are moving, for example, between some kids are coming in their final years of school into this, sixth form, quite stressful. And like you said, these new family initiatives and that kind of stuff. But stress is inevitable. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the school handles academic stress. And particular, there's disengagement issues as well with kids saying, I don't want school. So I just wanted to understand how the school approaches those families and those students in particular to give them the support.
Look, there's not really the same answer that applies to everybody, because I think stress is a fact of life. And I think that having a narrative with our students and our families where we say that it is impossible to go through, probably it's impossible to go through years of education culminating in a complex, challenging qualification like the IB diploma, where students then have to consider whether they go to university in this country or another country or indeed another continent. It's very difficult to de-stress a journey like that. Every student's on their own journey. Every student's got different pressure points or different sort of spike points. And from our perspective, that really, one of the things I suppose we fall back on or we rely upon is how well we know students, and therefore being able to respond in a way that is going to have a meaningful outcome. Because what we don't want is stress to turn into longer term health issues. So therefore being able to intervene and being able to work with families and being able to help students navigate points of stress is for me always the starting point, because sometimes there are things we can do to take stress away, but most of the time I don't think we can. I think most of the time stress is there for a reason. Work is stressful. Being academically aspirational is stressful. Learning every day, sometimes in your second or third language, at times is very challenging and can lead to stress. What we need to do is we need to work with our students and families and work out whether there are, within all of that, factors or variables that we can control, because we can't control things like when work has to be, when final deadlines are and when exams are and things like that. But But sometimes when stress becomes apparent, it may be exacerbated by things like nutrition or exercise or sleep or relationships with their peers or relationships with anyone really. And that's where we feel like we can be quite analytical and as Sophie said earlier, go into problem solving mode, because we're not really in the business of just recognizing problems and wringing our hands. We're in the business of trying to fix problems and give students the tools to fix their own problems, because we're very conscious also of the fact that when lots of our students leave us, the next thing they are going to do is study at a university or something like that. So everything we do has to be about equipping our students to be stronger and to have more tools as they go on with their lives.
Excellent. Well, there's one area that we haven't really touched on that I just wanted to make sure that we got in before we wrapped up. And that's the topic of inclusion. Obviously, Singapore, the beauty of it is how multi-ethnic it is, and these kids get so much exposure to different cultures. So I just wanted to understand from the school's perspective, Sophie, your work in that area, the importance of inclusion and making sure that kids feel, again, back to safe and a part of it. Tell us more about the inclusion side of North London Collegiate School.
Yeah, so I think what we kind of strive for is this idea of the diversity here is a lived experience. We are around people from a multitude of cultures. We've got students who are living a third culture life, in a British style education in Singapore, which is a multicultural place where they perhaps have different cultural identities based on where they've lived before or where their parents come from. So we just need to absolutely wrap ourselves around that as a gift to the school. One of the parts of the conversation that I have with students, and I work very closely with the pastoral team on this and the academic team, is this concept of bridges, not barriers, that we want to create cultural bridges between us and the wider community at all times. So we want to make sure that the way that we have daily interactions, the way we greet people, the way that we understand how different things will pressure different people and different outcomes look different for different individuals. It's all about forming bridges and connections. When we talk about maybe times, we mentioned mistakes earlier, when we might put a barrier up between us and someone because we don't understand them or we haven't asked the questions. And we teach that genuine cultural curiosity and asking questions is a good thing. For example, we are currently during Ramadan talking to students about what fasting means, and members of our Islamic community are coming forward and talking about what fasting is all about and what that truly means to them. And we make sure then that's reflected in tutor interactions or assembly opportunities, but on a much more personal level, just in friendship groups and new students arriving in school. Like, what dialogue are we having with them to make sure that they've got this concept of we build bridges with as many people as we can? Doesn't mean you have to be absolute best friends with everybody you meet. It just means that we are forming a bridge or a connection and we understand. This goes a lot further when it comes to making sure that our staff are really aware of their language, of that they're aware of anything that can be considered, for example, an assumption or unconscious bias coming through. And this is stuff that Laurence and I talk about quite a lot, about the fact that we also need to have a really good personal awareness of teachers, of a multitude of cultures in front of us in every single lesson, of what our language sounds like and how are we being as inclusive as possible to our environment. So we have additional training for our staff to make sure that they understand that even, like, for example, the way something's communicated to a family can be interpreted in lots of different ways, especially if they're from lots of different cultural backgrounds. And most of parents' understanding of schools is based on their own education. And for us, our parents have been educated in multitude of continents and countries worldwide. So it's just trying to make sure that they understand this is the North London journey. This is what, for example, restorative practice looks like here. This is what our communication looks like, and kind of taking them on that journey, but also being open to hearing their ideas, their suggestions, like what will work best within their community. And I suppose it helps our students and our families to build confidence in navigating the unfamiliar and do that in a way that's respectful and do that in a way that's curious.
Like the curiosity. That's another one of the IB terms, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much. I mean, I think you've really given us insight, both in terms of the overall approach to pastoral care, safeguarding, and inclusion at the school, but also how it drills down into the home, tips for parents, and obviously how the students are integrated throughout the whole thing. And I loved what you said earlier as well about how everyone knows the students. It's a simple concept, but it's so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing all that. I have one more question, which is just a little fun one at the end of the chat. In terms of, you've worked at different schools, you've had a lot of different approaches over the years in terms of education. I just want to get your definition of what you think is a great school. And maybe Laurence, you can start with us.
Good question. What's a great school? Well, I think Sophie made a point earlier, which I think is really important, in that everyone is an expert on schools because everybody or most people went to school. And we're really conscious of that and I think it informs our individualized approach to education. So, and I think that's probably the best answer I can give, which is the fuzzy nostalgic view I have of my own education back in the UK is kind of what drives me. And the way I would define it is that for me, school was a place where I fell in love with my subjects. So I'm a history teacher, and I knew when I was about 15 that I wanted to be a history teacher because I just loved my history lessons so much. I loved my history teacher. I loved the way, I just loved the kind of the passion and the knowledge and the way I felt like I was like this subject was equipping me for the rest of my life. So there's that I suppose realistic part of me that schools hopefully give that to everybody. And if we're successful, then in 20 or 30 years time, our students will have moments or subjects or topics which just kind of made their minds come alive and gave them that clarity of their purpose in the world. So for me, having a culture, and I think NLCS generally, but also NLCS Singapore is a place that really promotes and celebrates the idea of academic passion. And we haven't really talked about that much today because obviously me and Sophie spend most of our time thinking about sort of different sides to that multifaceted, way of looking at education. But for me, a great school is a place where people feel warm, connected, where they feel safe, where they feel like they're part of something, where they feel like they're part of a community, but also where they get the inspiration for what they're going to do next. And that's certainly what my school was.
Excellent. I like the warm and fuzzies. That's a good sign. And Sophie, what's your definition of a great school?
So I think the words that come into my head straight away is this idea of belonging in a setting, and that there is opportunity for everyone that's kind of limitless. I think the best schools and environments I've been in that doesn't cap people based on initial presumptions or sort of their initial kind of first year at the school. Maybe they struggled to settle in and they didn't necessarily flourish in exactly the way they had in their last school and things like that. And I think that the way here at North London, they phrase that is this idea of floors, not ceilings. And you just kind of raise the bar for each individual, and you keep pushing them up. You don't cap them with a ceiling. You just say that the opportunities are limitless. And I think here, when you look at the breadth of what these students are engaging in academically through our enrichment program, through their leadership opportunities and things, these students are remarkable. But I think they're remarkable because they're not limited. They're told you can. And that just, the best schools I've been in, then it's an absolute can-do environment. We will absolutely do everything to help keep raising it up for you rather than capping or saying no.
Another good thing to remember. So I want to thank you both so much for joining Little Steps Insider Series today. We've discussed a lot of interesting things, not just about the school, but genuine tips to take home for families. So really appreciate the insights. And it's great to see how much the school cares and integrates the family and the kids within the environment. So thank you for sharing. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time on the next Little Steps Insider Series. See you later.
Thank you, Shea.
Thank you. Bye-bye.